Important disclaimer. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of SleepTech Talk and its team members. The material and information represented in this episode is for general information purposes only. SleepTech Talk name and all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. All right, guys. Good to see everybody's smiling faces once again, and so it's time for some pre-cals. What's going on today?
Hey, I think we're going to have a little lively conversation today.
Lively.
There's been some lively. That's the word that we want to use.
All right.
There's been some local coverage determinations that have changed related to home sleep apnea testing in the Palmetto market. So Emerson and I both know Shane Mobley and invited him to come on to the podcast today and tell us a little bit about, where the background came from for some of those changes and where he sees, the need to have those changes implemented in their particular, in that particular market. And you'll find him to be very passionate about this topic, and we'll give you, his long history of the changes and why they were needed. So lively conversation ahead.
I hope we get some insights too, because we've all probably had questions, from around the country with people wanting clarification and understanding, and so the people we know want to play by the rules. So I hope this gives us some insight into what they're facing.
Definitely sounds really interesting, and with this kind of hot topic, shall we just move forward, get on to the show?
Look forward to it.
Yeah.
All right.
Like that.
Welcome, everyone, once again to another episode of SleepTech Talk, the sleep podcast, with your hosts and friends, Robert Miller, Emerson Kerr, and me, Dr. Gerald George Mannikarote. We're here for another fantastic episode. Part of the reason why it's so fantastic is because of you, the listeners, and we thank you so much for all that you do for us, all the likes, the shares, subscriptions. We can't thank you enough for that. Please keep it up. It helps not just the podcast, not just the show, but it also helps other techs out there and everyone who you want to hear about sleep health and sleep wellness and sleep technology. With that being said, Robert, what's going on today?
Hey, Jerry, thank you. And you looked at me as soon as you hit record, and I wasn't exactly sure what you were looking at me for, and then I forgot that I actually normally start the show with lights out. I forgot for a minute. But we have with us today, we have Shane Mobley. Shane is out of the Georgia area, and I know that he has been involved in the field of sleep medicine for a long time. I'm going to let him really introduce himself and tell us a little bit about how he got into sleep medicine, what he's doing today, and then we've got a few questions that we want to ask him. We know there's been some policy changes related to Medicare and home sleep apnea testing, and we want to get his take on those changes and how he's been involved in that. And so Shane, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into sleep, what you're doing today, and just help us get the show kicked off.
All right, so my primary background is in respiratory therapy. I'm a registered respiratory therapist, and actually went to the Atlanta School of Sleep Medicine and got trained in sleep while I was a therapist, back when that program was actually around in its heyday, I would say. And that was pretty much the primary place people went to on this side of the country. If they didn't come on this side of the country, they would go to sort of California. And so I got trained in that, and I was doing a lot of rural care, always loved business, and realized there was a large company that was doing sleep medicine in rural-based communities that were not doing it the right way. Back in those days, Emerson can understand this. They were using the night watch system back then. It really wasn't a true PSG. So I was really really frustrated.
Yourself there, buddy.
Yeah. So I was very, very frustrated about how the rural communities were doing. And how they were being treated. So I just really felt like God called me into going into that and doing the best that I could. And so that's what I did. And there's a little bit of a backstory there. I won't go into those details, but long story short, I started doing sleep medicine. That was when I was inspired to go to Atlanta School of Sleep Medicine. Then I worked as a hospital therapist at night, business person during the day. And then by doing that, within about 3 years, well, after 6 months, I quit the hospital. And then within 3 years, I was the largest rural care provider in the state of Georgia. Then on year 7, I sold to a larger company out of the Northeast that was part of Johns Hopkins, and then eventually became part of GE Healthcare as well. And then I stayed there for about 3 years, took a year off, and built Avilis, which is Avilys, Avilis Sleep. And I created that company. After about a year, I started in business, and we'll celebrate our 13th anniversary around in November, December of this year. And we would have been in it for 13 years. So I just really took a lot of the experience that I had from before. And after I sold, some of the rural hospitals sort of fell back. I sort of came back in and filled that gap. And so I'm now the largest rural care provider again in that space. So I've been doing this now for quite some time. I've known Emerson back in his Respironics days. Emerson, we probably go back 20 years, honestly.
Yeah, 2004.
Yeah, 2004. And I started my business around 1999. My original business was 1999. And then when I got out of it was 2007 is when I got out of it. And then started this company. Obviously you can do the math on around 2010 or so when I started this business back, 10, 11, kind of a thing like that. So I've been in this business a long time. I've seen a lot of things change over the years. I've seen a lot of providers come and go. I've seen a lot of those things over the years, and we do EEG testing too. So we sort of fill that rural gap as far as doing ambulatory EEG with video. So we go into a lot of places that a lot of large companies, it doesn't make fiscal sense, but I feel like it's a great community service to have. And we do pediatrics. So we do pediatric studies as well as adult studies, and it really keeps people from going to CHOA, which is Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, which is a great place. It's just that if you're in a small rural area, you just, that access to that care is really not there. So we really do bridge that gap. And then more recently, the governor appointed me for the state of Georgia, appointed me to the State Board of Long-Term Care administrators, and basically that oversaw nursing homes, long-term care on the admin licensing side. And then I had a desire to do something more. And then the governor appointed me to the Department of Community Health. And that board pretty much oversees everything healthcare. So we are over the Medicaid program for the state. We're over the state health benefit plan. We're also licensed every healthcare facility, CON. We're over pharmacy. We're over dentistry. The Composite State Medical Board is attached to us, as well as drugs and narcotics. And the State Office of Rural Health is also a part of us. And so we oversee about $20+ billion of a $26 billion state budget. So there's 9 of us on that board, and we do a lot of really great work and helping people throughout our state to gain access to healthcare. So that's the really short Cliff Notes version of everything. There's a lot more, but that's a short version of it. Yeah.
That's pretty good, Shane. You actually answered one of my questions that I had listed for today's podcast already. I was going to ask how you got involved with the Department of Health. So thank you for giving us some insight. But I know that you were recently involved in helping to make some of the changes to the Palmetto local coverage determination. And
right.
Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about and that whole process, so that our audience will sort of understand how that all happens and then how it's sort of administered?
So many years ago, a lot of people didn't follow the LCD. I think a lot of us know that. And part of it had said many years ago that even in the previous LCD, you had to have a registered sleep technologist to score the study. And what happened is a lot of people ignored that and thought, well, the MD can do it, and that sort of circumvents that. And that was really not the intent. So what happened with Medicare, one of the reasons why that change happened years ago, there was a doctor who decided to go to a weekend sleep course and decided that now he was a sleep doctor, that agitated some of the MDs that were at Medicare, and they were, like, no, you're not a sleep doctor. That was when that LCD came out and said, you have to have a registered sleep doctor. You also have to have all of your labs accredited. Prior to that, Emerson can tell you, and you guys probably know this too. If you don't, then I'll tell you. You used to could go up under a hospital's Joint Commission accreditation or any other accreditation. When that LCD got changed, 6-7 years ago, whatever, that required every single lab, regardless of the accreditation of the hospital. If you did hospital-based labs, which we do a lot of that, and we have freestanding centers too, you had to now become accredited. It didn't matter what the hospital had. And part of that is you had to have a registered tech to look at the study. It couldn't be auto-scored. If you want to do that, you still had to have somebody to look after it. And we know a lot of people didn't do that. So fast forward, you start having a lot of wearable devices. You have a lot of bad actors that are in this field who really are not paying attention to anything that's going on with the LCD. I got involved because I know the people at Medicare, and I expressed some concern. COVID happened, that really slowed things down for quite some time. And then they started looking at some of the things that were coming out with some of the different providers that were out there, providers that didn't have people licensed in certain states. The doctors were not licensed to practice medicine. And it just became the wild, wild west. Anybody over a beer or someone who thought they wanted to go into sleep medicine decided that they could just start doing those types of things. So then I got involved and I said, let's close the gap. And basically let's make it a little bit more specific, and make sure that people can't come back and go, we really didn't understand this. Well, we thought maybe a doctor could score it. We really didn't know. And everybody tries to play dumb and act innocent, when at the end of the day, you can read it and it's very plain. But when I got involved with it, my part of it, when it was redone, I did the more clinical side of everything. And then they did more of the billing side of it, where you have to have some things in there as far as like if you're going to bill certain aspects of it, there's certain qualifications that you have to have as far as global billing versus non-global billing, and making sure that you meet those requirements. I got involved on the more clinical side that said that you have to, have a registered tech, you have to, have all of that done. And then if all the requirements are not made, you cannot submit it to bill, because a lot of people were still billing those things. And now it's very clear, if you don't have these certain things involved, don't even drop the bill to Medicare. Just don't even do it if you're not planning on doing it right. And part of that is you have to make sure that this study is scored by a registered tech, and there's very specific language. So I had a lot of people that said, wow, someone who must be in the industry actually did that, because most of the time when you look at a lot of these LCDs, a lot of these rules and regulations are made, but it's not with the knowledge that a lot of people have that goes so specific into minute details in that. So I think that's really, that was pretty much the difference there. Yeah.
You and I have talked a little bit about this offline, and one of the challenges of this and is the access to care. When we look at what we're facing in sleep technology and in sleep medicine, is how do we reach more people? How do you feel like this can impact some of those channels to care, and what can our listeners do maybe who've adopted some of this technology or some of these processes in the past. How can they pivot to adjust to this change or this clarification, better yet?
Well, my main thing that I would say as far as how they're going to meet it, they just have to follow the rules. The problem is that, what's happened is you have people who are trying to they're becoming HST mills. There's a less focus on the quality, and the people that are out here that are trying to do it the right way, those are the people that actually get hurt. And the people who think this is the wild, wild west of healthcare are going to have to slow down, because now I wrote very specific things in it, and it says in there, you cannot bill. So, if people start billing these things and you start getting audited and those things are not part of that, it's going to be a problem. And you have, large companies like Apria, a lot of these other companies that are out there when it comes to setting up DME equipment. I think what's going to happen is the cream is going to rise to the top, and you're going to have data that you can trust, rather than having data that you can't trust. And if you don't have a human being looking at this stuff like you're supposed to, no one's going to really know. It's just going to be a free-for-all, and no one's really going to understand what's happening. And don't get me wrong. I mean, we have people a lot of times that will come to us and go, we don't believe in the data that we got back because of some of the new wearable devices that are out there. Some of the larger DME companies are starting to look at some of the data they're getting from the sleep companies and going, wait a minute, you don't have a registered tech's name down. You don't have the doctor saying that, the doctor's on, you don't have he or she's information, and you don't have the sleep tech's name on there. So what's happened is they'll come in and they'll say, oh, we have a sleep tech looking over it, but they really don't. So really, this is an issue with the fact that people were not doing what they were supposed to be doing the whole entire time. So now the end result of this is that now there is going to be a slowdown on that. As far as, some people having access to it, but I don't see it being a problem. I mean, you and I have done this a long time. Everyone who wants something, they're going to have a little bit of a wait, but I think we're naive to sit back and to think that sleep medicine is any different than MRIs, CAT scans. If you go to get an appointment with your doctor today, they may tell you you're going to have to wait a month, 2 months. Some specialists could take you 6 months before you see them. So the fact that we're, screaming for the hills going, oh, no one's going to have access to healthcare. They will have access to sleep medicine and sleep care. It's just that the idea of saying, if I want it today, I get it today. You might not want it today and get it today. And a lot of that, you can't do it anyway because of insurance, pre-certifications. There's all these different things that are out there that are barriers to fulfilling that. But we can't have a reduction in quality, because here's what's going to happen. If we don't put some quality measures into our industry, then anyone who has an idea at nighttime at any restaurant on a napkin can try to come into this business. And we must maintain some type of integrity and some type of quality measures inside of it. People like us that are accredited and people like us that are in network with multiple insurance companies, we have all of these standards we have to meet. If someone goes into this business and they say, look, I'll just take cash paying patients, then where's the quality going to come in with that? It's going to be very hard for our industry. And what happens, it's just going to erode everything that everyone has done over multiple decades to say, hey, look, sleep medicine is real medicine. You have to be looked at it a certain way. If you don't, then it's going to be an issue. It's almost kind of like, you have Apria and some of the large companies out there, and you have all these little nose things at night that I see on Facebook, and they're trying to get away from CPAP, which we know obviously is the gold standard. And everyone's trying to circumvent real medicine. And what I'm trying to do is make sure that we have real medicine, people looking at the data. And I'll tell you, it came straight from them. They do not want AI or a computer looking at x-rays one day saying this woman has breast cancer or this woman does not have breast cancer. This person has brain cancer. This person does not have brain cancer. So if anyone thinks for a minute that AI scoring is going to take over, that is a pipe dream. That's never going to happen, ever, especially on my watch. You will have a human being to look at it. If you want to auto score, that's great. Put your life in your own hands, sign off on the document saying that you looked at it. That's perfectly fine. There are ways for them to go behind it. We already know. I've talked to some of the manufacturers. They have put in back doors. They do know if someone has manually scored that study. If they violate those rules, they sign that report, it's go to jail time. And if people are naive to think that that's not going to happen, they need to think again. And they should be very concerned, because I can tell you right now, Medicare doesn't require pre-certs. We all know that. The Medicare program loses, tens of billions of dollars every year for people doing things that they're not supposed to. But trust me when I tell you, when they hone in on a bad actor, they will go in and they will look at almost every piece of that data. And when that happens, it's refund time, and all of those things. And now, the latest thing that I heard is that based on what the U.S. prosecutors can do, it used to be 7 times. Now they can get 20 times the amount that you bill fraudulently. So, if there's a sleep owner, hospital, anyone listening to this podcast, they need to take heed. If they're not following that Medicare LCD, which the insurance companies will be following, I know that they've been in contact with United Healthcare. If they think for a minute that they don't need to take this serious, and if they don't think for a minute that this is not going to go, that LCD is going to go across the entire country, and it will update every single LCD around the United States. And because they feel so strongly about having computers to be involved in our healthcare and taking the human being out of it.
Shane, let me ask you something. I mean, one of the challenges that face sleep technology, sleep medicine, is cost of care, is the process. When you look at the reason people pursue these technologies, it's part of its efficiency. I mean, you've seen a reduction in reimbursement, that it's an erosion. So on the other side of this conversation is, what can we do to change the reimbursement to reflect a fair compensation for these sleep labs, sleep doctors, because it's not fair. And what about even compensating sleep techs for their efforts on the coaching and the education and the follow-up? Because I totally hear what you're saying, but there's another side to it that Medicare needs to come back to the table and say, here's a fair compensation, a fair reimbursement for these activities. So how do we find the balance here that, if we're going to promote great care and great science, how do we pay for that in a way that's reasonable and fair for our community?
So what's happened, so part of this in the grand scope of planning is to make sure that, I can go back and ask for more money when the care that is being given is appropriate care. So what's happened is, obviously there was a huge utilization spike in the amount of people receiving sleep medicine, sleep studies, particularly home sleep. So the reason the reimbursements have come down is there's only so much money, right? So as more people use it, in order to spread the amount of dollars, there's a finite amount of dollars that go into any program like Medicare, Medicaid, or whatever. You have to reduce that because so many people are getting it. So if you can slow down the amount of people that are getting it, and when I say slow down, I'm talking about people who actually need it versus in lab. Because a lot of the patients that we see, if everyone on here can understand this, if you go and you look at a lot of people that get home sleep studies, they have comorbid conditions. They should never even be getting them. They should actually be inside of a lab. So what's happened over the country, a lot of labs have shut down when literally a lot of these patients should be actually going inside the lab, not being utilized at home.
But don't you know, though, that you've had some of that was driven by payers, because we've had patients where we go to our customers that we've all called on have gone to do what you're saying, but what comes right back at them is, no, you got to do a home sleep test at this amount of money. So part of this is being driven down to the clinician in a way that makes it unaffordable to do it. So now what you're saying, you've got a comorbid patient who all of us would agree needs an attended study, but they end up getting a home sleep apnea test because the payer is looking for a cheap way to pay for it. And so in no big surprise, we're going to be looking for efficient ways to do that test so we can actually make some money and make a living at SleepTech. So where's the give and take on that?
Well, what happens?
That's the challenge.
Right. So what happens is you have a bunch of people who don't. Okay, so you have a bunch of people who have no business being in sleep medicine, and this is where the lack of experience and people who are sitting around across a restaurant table drinking a beer because they think it's a get rich quick money scheme. If you are adequately staffed and you know what you're doing, we have all the comorbid conditions that keep someone from having an in-lab versus a sleep study. My labs are full all the time. I need more space for my in-labs. Why? Because we qualify those people. If people have comorbid conditions and we send those comorbid conditions in, we're never denied a home sleep study. If they don't have those comorbid conditions, we don't even attempt it because we know that they're going to be denied. Why even waste our time? So what happens is you have very understaffed, underfunded people who really don't know what they're doing, people who have no medical background, they have no sleep background, they have no background. They had other businesses at some point. They heard they can make a lot of money in sleep. Those are the people who are overutilizing home sleep tests. Those are the people who are not hiring registered techs. Those are people who are not manually scoring. Those are people who are doing auto scoring. And they're and trust me, they're on Medicare's radar. Those are the type of people that are overutilizing it because it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, you can't have every patient that comes to you. That's like, so for instance, it's like this. That's like saying you're a general surgeon. Every patient that comes to you that gets evaluated for surgery doesn't need surgery. But in sleep medicine, no one ever says, no, stop. Hey, you don't really qualify for a home sleep test. I don't really have any labs. I'm going to send it over to Emerson's, Sleep Lab Incorporated, because that person is going to adequately treat you better. They never do that. They take you regardless of the fact they know good and well if they have restless leg syndrome or they have other issues, they're not a candidate, or central apnea, they're not a candidate for HST. So what they've done is they've overutilized a program to a point to where it just doesn't make any sense. So my goal is, if you can if someone needs an HST, that's great. If someone needs an in-lab, that's great. Now let's adequately compensate the good actors, get rid of all the bad actors, and then start increasing the reimbursement again on the other side. But it's hard for them when you have a finite amount of dollars, and all of a sudden, you have a 500% increase in sleep HSTs, and then all of a sudden you have to keep the reimbursement up there. So if the utilization is high, they have to lower the reimbursement rate to keep the same amount of finite dollars that's out there. If you were to look at, like, say, in-lab studies, that's becoming that part of that's actually been underutilized because all these HST companies that are popping up are just, where's the quality control there? So, the people that are part of Medicare or the programs and things of that nature, and some of the insurance companies, there has to be a little bit of a balance there. But I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying on your side, and it is a delicate balance. I want to see reimbursements go up again. But here's the thing. In order for that to happen, I'm just going to be honest with you. Medicare is going to have to start prosecuting, putting people in jail. And you will start seeing all the bad actors leave. You will see people who say, I don't want any part of that. I don't want to do that. Let me go pick another get rich quick scheme. Maybe they'll do Facebook Marketplace, and maybe they'll sell stuff on eBay or something to try to make their living, because that's about as good as some of these people are in the market, in my opinion. So if they do that, then you can start getting more appropriate care. But I think it would be really difficult if you were to look at this to think everybody that goes to a surgeon doesn't need surgery. But it seems like anybody that comes to an HST meal always gets an HST, whether they really need it or not. So if you look at it in another sense, it's unethical. And there are a lot of unethical HST providers that are out there that know that they should be doing things differently, but they don't. And we run into that all the time. So,
well, Shane,
I do want to make sure that we let our audience know that there are more people who do good sleep medicine than bad, just
right.
for the record. I don't want this conversation to derail the good that, most of our audience does every single night that they work with patients, or when they send a home sleep testing device home with a patient. So I hear you, and I know you're passionate about this, the maybe some overutilization and maybe some bad actors, but I think there's more good than bad, for sure.
Well, I will say this to you. If anybody takes offense of what I've said, it's the people who are not doing it the right way. The people who are doing it the right way, the correct way, are not going to be offended at all. Because if I heard this podcast and I heard, I'd be like, hey, I agree with him. We do appropriate care for people, all the time. We make sure that we do that. The people who are offended are the people who are not set up to do pre-certs, who are not, set to do those types of things. I agree. I want to believe that there are a lot more people out there that are good than are bad, but you do have a few bad actors that have lots of high volume. And what's happening is it's hurting the entire industry. It's hurting everybody. And I anticipate clawbacks. I anticipate DME providers that are setting up CPAP machines, BiPAP machines, auto PAPs, or anything like that are not screening and making sure that all the things that Medicare says you have to have, they will be clawing that money back. So when it says, basically, you remember, I know you remember this in the days where you had to have the registered in Emerson. You remember you didn't have to have a doctor boarded in sleep. At one time you could have a doctor who, like a pulmonologist, that could read it, but they were not necessarily boarded. You remember that. And then they came out and they said, okay, you have to be boarded in sleep. Well, a lot of the DME providers at that time started rejecting a lot of interpretation reports because they were no longer, because they were not boarded in sleep. They started saying, hey, I'm rejecting that. We're not going to set up a CPAP machine on that. So if you look at how the LCD is written, it says if you don't have all these things in place, you cannot submit it for reimbursement. So if a DME company, all DME companies, and this is a cry out to all the DME companies that are going to be listening to this, you need to look at the sleep reports coming from every sleep provider that's out there. If you don't have the registered text name down, if you don't have, on the report that it was manually scored, not auto scored, but manually scored, if you don't have all those things, reject it. Do not set that up. Just tell them from the outset, I'm sorry, this does not qualify, because it says in the LCD, you can't submit it for reimbursement. So that means if I set that up, it's not a proper transaction. So I would tell everybody to reject that and force the home sleep testing companies or providers to do it the right way. If not, I'm afraid that a lot of the innocent DME companies that are out there are going to find themselves in a situation to where they're going to have clawbacks and they're going to have to reimburse.
Shane, would love to keep this conversation going. It's definitely interesting, and at the same time, we are way over time, but we thank you so much. Where can people get more information about you if they want to contact you and continue this discussion offline?
They can find me on LinkedIn, any place like that. I mean, they can, give me a shout at my office, but you can find me on LinkedIn,
Good deal. Good deal. Well, Shane, thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us, and it was definitely a lively discussion. Obviously, you're very passionate with what you do, and we appreciate your outreach to the rural areas because, like you said, that's very often not taken care of. So thank you so much for that. And our folks out there, we thank you so much for joining us once again for another episode. We can't thank you enough for listening and propagating the word of sleep and sleep technology. And to all the good providers out there, we thank you so much. Now, until next time, we say, lights on. Important disclaimer. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of SleepTech Talk and its team members. The material and information represented in this episode is for general information purposes only. SleepTech Talk name and all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. Okay, post-Cals, I think, Robert, you had a word to describe what we could expect today, and that was lively, and I would agree with you. This was lively, this conversation.
It was. I think that where I sort of fall out on this thing is that I hope that the reimbursement that's necessary to provide the type of care that Shane is so passionate about will find its way, back into the marketplace. And Emerson, I think you had a really poignant way of being able to articulate the concern that providers have of being able to administer, appropriate testing to patients, but to be able to do it in a way that they can afford to do it, in today's economy. And, I just hope that medical policy doesn't drive us to a place where we, aren't able to provide care for patients because, there's just not enough dollars to actually pay for the service that they are requiring.
No, and there are plenty of bad actors in our space, but there are plenty of bad actors across healthcare and business in general. But I think for the people, for most people, most of the ones that we interact with, and we're so fortunate to have as our listeners, they care about the patient, they care about the journey, they care about themselves. I mean, they don't want to go to jail or pay a fine or do anything inappropriate. So I do feel like for most of the people, we're fortunate enough to know they want to play by the rules. And I understand Shane's perspective. It's, he wants to clean up some of the more difficult parts of this, the bad actors, and that's tough. Those people, just like in anywhere else in life, they end up making it difficult for everyone else, and that's unfortunate. But I am glad we got to hear from Shane today. We've had a lot of people asking questions about the LCD, what is meant by it, and I think this gave us some insight into the background and what we can expect.
I've got nothing else to add. I think you guys are right, and I heard a lot over the past 20 plus minutes. So I think let's leave it at that and close for today.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
All right, folks. Until next time. Cheers.